So once upon a time, there was a video game company called Capcom who put out a little game called Rockman, which was then localized into a game called Mega Man. And it was something of a unique beast for its time. You were able to go through any of the initial 6 levels of the game in any order you wished. You gained new weapons by defeating the bosses of these stages, used those weapons in a sequential rock, paper, scissors order against other bosses, and the game essentially had solid gameplay mechanics that enabled you to conquer 10 challenging empires.
Or if you were a complete pussy, you would use the pause trip to win.
Oh my god, it works well!
It wasn't a huge hit, but it was enough of a sleeper to merit a sequel, and the rest you probably already know. The original Mega Man set the foundation for what would be the beginnings of a popular franchise, and subsequent sequels would add their own layers. Mega Man 2 established a template that would be followed by later Mega Men, such as 8 Robot Masters to choose from, Passwords, Energy Tanks, and Skull Castle. Also, it was considerably easier to clear than the original game, and that's not even taking into consideration the so-called normal mode, which made the game even easier. Mega Man 3 added the slide ability to go through narrow passages, as well as introduce a couple staples of Mega Man lore, and it was also more of a challenge to conquer than Mega Man 2. Following 3 games of a similar ilk, Mega Man 4 didn't have a lot of new things going for it. It added a charge ability to your newly dubbed Mega Buster, as well as alternative means of getting extra tools, and some limited alternating paths. But the 4th edition in the series took what came before, added a couple new perks, and put it all together in a way that makes the whole thing seems like something refined and fresh. For me at least, Mega Man 4 took the tried and tested Mega Man formula and refined it to perhaps its finest form. The first thing that set Mega Man 4 apart from the rest was the framing story. No longer were you fighting the forces of evil Dr. Wily, but instead the forces of the supposedly evil Dr. Cossack, a Russian scientist who conveniently built his own robots to counter Mega Man. While everybody, long-time fans, short-time fans, and non-fans probably all know better by this point, having played the game and all in 20 plus years since, this was actually a bit of a big deal back in the day, and it was actually something somewhat different from the previous efforts, at least for the most part. In terms of gameplay, Mega Man 4 is your standard Mega Man fare. Pick any of the 8 Robot Masters, fight through their stages, defeat the boss, claim their weapon, and repeat the whole process 7 more times until you're able to access the final stages of the game. It's a simple formula that works, and doesn't really require that much tinkering. Much like Mega Man 3 introduced the slide as a new ability, Mega Man 4 grants you the ability to charge your Mega Buster and unleash a more powerful shot against your foes. This ends up being a helpful tool in Mega Man's arsenal, especially since the bosses are much tougher and your basic shot only takes off 1 point off their meter. Fortunately, your robotic K9 rushes back to aid you with the Rush Coil, and 2 other adapters you have to earn. If you played Mega Man 3, you already know what they are. They're the Rush Marine, which is a submarine, and a Rush Jet. The only change to the Rush Jet is that it propels forward constantly, but at least you have control over the altitude and speed. So, yeah. In addition to your usual Rush adapters, you also have 2 additional accessories, the wire and the balloon, that you must actively seek out in the stages themselves, where they are hidden in places you would not normally look. While not necessary additions to your arsenal, they are useful ones and are needed to reach places you otherwise couldn't get to through normal means. This kind of extra meat adds to the play experience in Mega Man 4, and is something that is also applied in later titles to a certain extent. Another feature introduced in Mega Man 4 is the occasional appearance of Eddie, aka Flip Top, who will drop a random item to help you out, whether it be energy capsules, lives, or even energy tanks. The variety of weapons you acquire in a game are fairly decent, with a couple being altered retreads of previous weapons. While I can agree that Brightman's Flash Stopper is a ripoff of Time Man's Time Stopper, the name says so after all, I'll argue that Brightman's variant is better than the Time Stopper, due to the fact that it doesn't drain your entire weapons meter, and you can also shoot while everything is frozen. The Skull Barrier might not be as offensive-minded as the Leaf Shield, but at least you won't have to worry about it launching prematurely by pressing the D-pad in the wrong direction or something. That is, if you even bother to use it. Even so, the few unique weapons like the chargeable Pharaoh Shot, Dive Missile Seeker Weapon, and Screen-Filling Rain Flesh are also fairly useful weapons in their own right. And unlike in 2 or 3, you can revisit stages you've already beaten before in case you want to recover any adapters you missed, or to stock up on energy tanks or lives if you so desire. This is especially useful if you're continuing a game because the passwords do not take energy tanks into consideration. And also you can go back and hunt for those balloon and wire items that you might have missed the first time around. Unlike in the original Mega Man, when you reach the end of a level, you automatically exit the level rather than refight the Robot Master that you just killed, which is just fine. The levels that you'll be fighting through are typical Mega fare, but they're nicely designed. Toadman stage starts you off in the rain and the wind actually impedes or enhances your jumping ability. Shoot a light bulb enemy in Brightman stage and the whole place goes dark for a short time. Carefully make your way past Dustman's trash compactors, all the while destroying barricades and avoid being flattened. None of it is nearly as intense as dodging super lasers in Quickman stage in Mega Man 2, but they are all equally challenging in their own right. The second half of the game certainly has its fair share of challenges. Mega Man 4 is rather challenging, not as difficult as Mega Man 1, but more so than Mega Man's 2 and 3. Yes, the Mega Buster does make things somewhat easier along the way, but the game itself is fairly tricky in certain aspects. Navigating portions of Brightman stage in the dark after you shot down a light bulb enemy while avoiding the pitfalls is not exactly a walk in the park, but it's doable. Likewise, the last leg of Dive Man stage has you timing your movements to avoid the mines and spikes that float up and down along with the wave. A daunting feat at first, but nonetheless beatable. There's a later level that has you hopping along platforms while the stage scrolls on its own. Every level has its share of challenges, and some of it might be considered difficult, but it's still fairly winnable. Longtime Mega Man players, however, shouldn't have too much of a problem with this. The Robot Masters themselves are hit or miss. Some dismiss the designs as goofy, but that's akin to saying the Earth is round. They're not exactly the most threatening cast of characters you'll ever come across, but they're not the worst either, and they could put up a decent fight if you let them. Pharaoh Man can give you trouble if you don't stop him in a flash. Drill Man's fairly durable even with the weakness weapon. And Skullman's a fun fight with just the Buster alone, especially when your shots ping off his shield. Man, it sounds beautiful. It actually tells a bit of a beautiful story there too. And yeah, once you trap him in a pattern, Toadman's a bit of a joke, but you know what? So is Airman. Take a few hits for the home team and pelt the bastard with pellets until he's turned to scrap metal. Easy. Besides, if you slip up the holding pattern with Toadman, his rain flush and body splashes can do heavy damage. Certainly, I would feel more threatened by a fat, body splashing toad thing than a scuba diving robot who shoots bubbles. Or a spinning top robot. Or burn rooster. Wait, how did that get there? With that out of the way, I'll admit there's nothing exceptional about Mega Man 4 in regards to the visuals. After all, the art style hasn't really changed all that much over the course of 4 games and beyond. Then again, if it isn't broken, don't fix it, right? All the Mega Man games have crisp, clean-looking graphics, and this one's no exception. Everything in the game just looks bright, colorful, and fairly detailed given the art style. No complaints at all, really. Okay, I'll mention there's some flicker and some slowdown issues at times, but in all honesty, I've never really experienced that much lag during my playthroughs, and flicker, quite frankly, is a constant in pretty much every Mega Man game once too much stuff is going on. One thing that I should probably mention is the weapons menu. Realizing that pop-up boxes and sliding menus were not the way to go in previous entries, Capcom decided to create an entire screen showing off all your toys. That's right, the weapon screen where you would pick and choose your various weapons, items, and energy tanks from made its debut in Mega Man 4. The one notable improvement in Mega Man 4 is the soundtrack. People will probably consider this to be blasphemy, but the music in Mega Man 4 I feel is some of the best in the series. No one Mega Man game has more appropriately composed music or iterations of classic tunes than this one, and more than anything does a fantastic job in giving the game its own atmosphere compared to what came before. True, it can be said that the music here is less cheery and a little heavier than those of its predecessors, but at the same time, it does help in giving this entry its own musical identity for better or worse. And if you were going for a different vibe with Mega Man 4, it's only fitting that the music follows suit. The sound, on the other hand, is your usual Mega Man sound clips, which are classic and good enough. The only real complaint I have is that whenever you charge your Buster, it brings up the annoying ringing noise that plays constantly and ruins the beautiful soundtrack as a result. Fortunately, they somewhat sorta fixed this in the later games. Other than that, solid work all around. People will often point to 2 or 3 as the best in the classic Mega Man run, and it's somewhat of a shame that people would often overlook Mega Man 4 needlessly because they believe the game ripped certain aspects from 2, but I prefer to see it as a refinement of a successful formula, just as Mega Man 2 was a refinement of Mega Man 1. This one has it all minus the totally unnecessary difficulty select presented in 2 and the broken password system present in 3. While Mega Man 2 introduced the standard by which all games in the series follows, Mega Man 4 refined the formula to perhaps its finest form. It looks good, sounds great, plays wonderfully, and is just an all-around solid package.